It's not that I'm saying it's theory that white people and black people, white liberals and black um, mainstream city dwellers should do a better job of getting along and understanding one another. I don't think that's theory. But as to why they don't do a better job or what would be a better job, that I would consider theory. So, one of the things I know from having studied a large number of civil rights era books and individuals and taken a number of classes in college on the subject of African American history is that it's a turf war. No matter if you get straight A's and really read and really are interested, there's a turn-off mechanism that throws an accusation at you if you don't pursue the critical race theory. Your mind and your curiosity become an object lesson of critical race theory. When I was very much under the um, brainwashing critical race theory, I used to go way out of my way to find African stores. Often they have white people in them, but as owners. But not always. I would say usually they didn't. But their businesses were not really well um, they didn't have a lot of customers. I don't think there's anything wrong with what you would call equity shopping. Arguments, um, some of them very good arguments, are made for insisting on shopping in black small businesses. And the problems of small businesses obviously transcend black small businesses in America. But there's, even in black consumers, a limit to what you can do to turn back the clock to tribal times. I think it's wiser to seek to understand things and preserve the memory of things past. Um, the blockbuster ideas about reparations and so on, I I'm not interested. I know that people in cities who are not very well to do get accused of holding each other back. And one of the reasons why black people end up pairing up with people who hate them rather than people who love them is that there's an exceptionalism that's being cultivated. And people who hate them are no longer holding them back. They want them to get ahead in the way that anti Semites encourage Zionists to keep them separate in their own exceptionalism. Separate but exceptional. If it was up to me, I would have spent a lot of time talking with African scholars about the civil rights movement in my 20s and 30s. But I was deemed to be interfering with the program that I was being pigeonholed in as a deaf white suck by the historic African and Jewish Alliance. I met Ralph Abernathy, the author of The Walls Came Tumbling Down. He was best friends with Martin Luther King. They got jailed together and went to collect the Nobel Peace Prize together. And the story is a little bit shufflesome. It's a foreign country, and Ralph Abernathy gets put in the wrong car and stuff. But those kinds of things happen. They were best friends. I met him at the William Pitt Student Union at the University of Pittsburgh, where I heard William F. Buckley speak. I had an regular column called The Ritual Descent in the Pitt News. A scholar from Temple University came there. They showed the film Zola, which is about a corrupt politician who they cover with spit in the end. And he was shouting at everybody. He was really abusive, this Temple teacher, saying, "What's the problem in the world?" And people say, "Racism." He goes, "White racism, white racism." There's mobility factors in mass culture in Pennsylvania that don't add up. The story of the civil rights movement seems to me to be a very charming aspect of American history. If you look at James Garfield, for example, he was white. Elijah Lovejoy was also white. They were both killed over abolitionist sentiments and the 14th Amendment and so on. But to understand Martin Luther King's civil rights movement and to appreciate American Black heritage, you have to see that James Garfield tried to bring about the end of segregation 18 years before Plessy versus Ferguson. If you doubt that, read his inaugural address. But he failed because he was killed. So, what is often overlooked because of the way that the star system functions. There were people in the civil rights movement who saw Martin Luther King as building a personality cult. Ella Baker was one of them. Bob Moses was another. They made pointed comments to the effect that the movement made King, the King didn't make the movement. I personally think that that was uncalled for. King knew what he was doing. But the celebrity superstate largely has gotten a huge boost throughout history by the Hollywood system. And Hollywood got off the ground reasserting the power of the defeated, glorifying the rise of the Ku Klux Klan as C.W. Griffith did with The Birth of a Nation. In understanding that story, it's very good to understand a Hollywood figure who was black named it was the era of Ida B. Wells and her fights against lynching. And Paul Robeson broke the color barrier to the extent of being a bona fide individual in the movies, not some kind of stereotype or caricature of the superstitious Negro, which was typical even later than his career in Charlie Chan films, for example. He was up against stereotypes in Hollywood, of course. The pianist in Casablanca that Ingrid Bergman calls a boy shows you what they were up against. But Anna May Wong was a Chinese actress who went against stereotypes of Chinese girls. Some of her family wouldn't talk to her. She was a friend of Paul Robeson. So the lure of personality cults is very much a part of the era and the movement and the questions that pertain to the era and the movement. When you look at the era and the movement from its origins, you're talking about an era that's culturally overshadows everything else is Harlem, the Harlem Renaissance. You had Conte Collin, the poet, Richard Wright, the genius, Zora Neale Hurston, the linguistic anthropologist of great poetry. She's rightfully renowned now. She was lost for a long time. And the dialogues that go back and forth between them about lynching, about authenticity in the literary arts, about America's place in the history of human progress, which is addressed by Frederick Douglass in his 4th of July speech, and many other things, contributions that Frederick Douglass made to our society. Are all important facets of the Harlem Renaissance. There's very noteworthy key figures that you have to look for and find to get to their relevance. There are threads, so to speak, cultural controversies, like the role of Booker T. Washington. Many people are inclined to depict him in a stereotyped way because he believed in separate but equal, accepted the notion of trying separate but equal. But a person who actually comes in contact with his achievements and his talents realizes that this is no Uncle Tom they're talking with or about. But he was rewarded for his man of compromise idea by the white establishment of Woodrow Wilson and D.W. Griffith, the racist people. He saw encouraging exceptionalism as the black community as a way of keeping things separate. Cast down your buckets where you are. So. And the Niagara movement was called the Niagara movement because they went there to get away from him, and now is known as the NAACP. It wasn't the first of its kind. The first of its kind was the United Negro Improvement Association of Marcus Garvey, who was introduced to Harlem society when he came here from Jamaica, by Hubert Harrison, the great street soapbox orator, who wrote When Africa Awakes. And if you look at Paul Robeson, whose career was around this time beginning, his father wrote a eulogy for Frederick Douglass, and his mother, I believe, worked with Hubert Harrison. I believe. That has to be fact checked. But a lot of things are tangled up in blue in the jazz era and the Harlem Renaissance. And it's well worth looking for these people, Carter Woodson and so on. They're very interesting individuals, and you can spend your life regarding them, learning about them, being mentored and influenced and challenged by them. Most people realize that America has made a great step forward in cultural preservation of our dignity. by making loud and clear that our national estate, in part, depends upon appreciation, regard, and advocacy for Martin Luther King. The search for common ground has even touched the world around us. He was not alone. It's not that it wasn't true that the movement made him. He didn't make the movement. Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was down south. King went down south, even though Coretta at first wanted to stay in the north where things were more celebrated of the patronage sectors of society so she could become a singer. But King wanted to lead from among the poor, and he went to Montgomery, Alabama during the bus boycott and led from the poor churches in Montgomery and Birmingham, where he met Fred Shuttlesworth and faced Bull Connor, the dogs and the fire hoses. The NAACP wasn't leading from the front, they were leading from the courtrooms. Roy Wilkins, the leader of the NAACP, Thurgood Marshall, these people went to the Supreme Court in cases like Brown versus Board of Education. And they were suit and tie people, like King was, like Robert Kennedy was, like Fannie Lou Hamer wasn't. She was a sharecropper's daughter who wore stained cotton dresses to the marches and sang This Little Light of Mine. King loved these people from the front. They endured great frights and tragedies. And I'm not saying that the people who were in Washington, D.C. didn't appreciate them. That would certainly be false. But as with all humans, there was schools of thought and incutting and rivalries. John Lewis was thrown out of leadership of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC as they called it, by Stokely Carmichael, who also threw out all of the whites and started a Black Power movement. The white martyrs of the movement are marginalized. I don't think any of this so-called keeping things in proportion is really called for, in my opinion. And the way that it pigeonholed me in a nightmare has soured me on the work involved, but not the history, not the actual content, not the beauty, not the literature, not the spirit, not the history, not the memories, not the achievements. I don't take assignments from UW Dialectical.